Good morning, and we have an action-packed reading for this Wednesday from our Old Testament reading in Exodus. We finally get down to the big story of the defeat of Pharaoh, the final defeat of the king of Egypt. It begins with a question. So the people fled after the plagues, and they said, "Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" Uh, Maybe because God sent locusts and hail and fire and turned the Nile to blood and lice and fleas and frogs and hailstones that killed a bunch of stuff. Oh, and all the firstborn in Egypt dying, right? I mean, this comfortable sort of amnesia, but also God drawing Pharaoh and his cronies out. Um, uh, how much is God actively doing this? How much is just him just letting their sinfulness go its way? Either way, Pharaoh makes ready his chariot and he's took his people with him. His people. So he's a serpent-like figure, right? And his people go with him. So the seed of the serpent is on its way. Chariots with captains over them. And again, God hardens Pharaoh's heart, and he pursues after the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with a high hand. I have to look out. I don't have the translation. Let me look at this with Exodus 14. Just double checking with some of the boldness, high-handedness. Just double checking the older phrasing there. So he pursues them, and he overtook them as they're encamping by the sea. And of course, the Israelites see him coming. They're marching after them, and they're terrified, and they cry out to the Lord. And then, of course, Israel always going back and forth, vacillating, rejoicing in their salvation, and it's like, yeah, let's do it. And then times get rough, and they say, no way. This is kind of universal, but it's also particularly sad since they've seen so many miracles already that God has wrought for them. But they say, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? The sarcasm there, it's thick, right? Are there not graves enough in Egypt so we could have died there instead of coming out here and getting slaughtered like animals out here in the middle of nowhere? And why'd you bring us out of Egypt? Well, maybe because you're crying in agony and your cries were heard by the Lord. Anyway, is not this word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us learn that we may serve the Egyptians? Yeah, you did when the going got rough and tough there. But for the most part, you've been game and you've been wanting to get rescued from your slavery. It's interesting, both the Israelites and the Egyptians have got short memory spans. A lot of people do, and this world does. A lot of short memory, a lot of amnesia, of not remembering the Lord, not trusting the Lord when it gets hard and when it gets cloudy and difficult. And it'd be better to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. Well, actually, it's going to happen. You are going to die in the wilderness for sins you do, but your children will survive you. Go to the promised land. Anyway, Moses goes unto them. He says, fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. So watch this, folks. And he'll fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. So God's going to fight. God's a battle axe. God's a warrior. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. So there was an angel of God. Was it the angel of the Lord, which is also the second person in the Trinity in a pre-incarnate state? Or is just a strong angel? It went behind them. The pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. Right? That's always the picture of God's covenant presence, and he goes behind to protect. And it comes between Pharaoh and the Egyptians, and there's a cloud and darkness. Again, darkness is one of the plagues. and it gave light to by night to thee, so that the one came not near the other all night. So basically, God creates a smoke and firewall, depending on what time of the day it is. So you either can't see, or there's literally fire separating Pharaoh from the people. And then Moses stretched forth his hands, and the sea, right? He has the rod, and the seas divide, the waters divide. Um, And God troubles the host of the Egyptians and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, um, so that the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians." And the Lord said unto Moses, "Stretch forth thy hand over the sea." Right? He does this. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the middle of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came to the sea after them. All right, so basically, Pharaoh finally, the firewall comes down. He tries to pursue the Israelites. He gets stuck in the mud, and God, with his chariots, of course, and then God floods it all and buries the whole army. And there's dead Egyptians upon the seashore for the Israelites to see that victory has been achieved on their behalf. God fought for them, and God fights for us too. That's what the cross is about. God fights for us, his people. Hebrews, talking about Jesus' incarnation, being made lower than the angels for the suffering of death. But if he suffers the death, and then he's crowned with glory and honor, his resurrection and ascension. He should taste death for every man. Right? Remember, he's kind of this ultimate firstborn. He's the first begotten of the grave, the firstborn of the grave of many brothers, bringing many sons to glory. That's us, the many sons of glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For both he that sanctifieth, that's Christ, and they who are sanctified are all of one. Right? We're all one with Jesus. We're family. We have the same nature, same human nature. And he calls us brethren, right? He's not ashamed to do that. So again, Christ our brother. Is that joyful, joyful, we adore thee? Talks about that. That's good. And behold, I and the children which God hath given me. Again, and the children are partakers of flesh and blood. Kind of a meal imagery there, and of course, when we think of meal imagery in the church, we think Eucharistic imagery as well, partaking of Christ's flesh and blood, and in faith. And he partook of flesh and blood, of course, being incarnate, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is, the devil. So again, God fights for us. God fights for us. He fights for us and removes the power of devil. That's like the Death Star for the devil. I mean, once that's gone, and the Imperial fleet is gone. Star Wars reference. But the point being that there's taking all the power out of Satan's hand, and Satan's, just kind of left scrambling, fighting a losing battle, and deliver those who fear death. We're subject to bondage, right? We're freed from death's tyranny, Satan's tyranny. Again, God, he did this not by taking on the nature of an angel, but on him, the seed of Abraham, a human being, particularly Israelite, right? The king of everything is Jewish. And then there's a high priest imagery and things pertaining to God. The high priest thing is very big and important, as well as the kingliness in Hebrews, but pointing already to making reconciliations for the sins of the people. And Christ suffered temptation, but he never gave in. But that lets him be able to give his strength and lend his strength to us to overcome temptation. He also sympathizes with us in our weaknesses. But with that, I'll leave us. It's a lot going on there. But the important thing for both of these is we see God fighting for us. Jesus particularly fighting for us to save us and redeem us from our enemies. So remember that as you go through this day, and I'll see you later.